I am Nomad.
No, you're not Nomad. You're an alien machine.
It doesn't matter which side runs the village.
It's run by one side or the other.
Oh, certainly. But both sides are becoming identical.
Because the owners of this country know the truth. It's called the American dream, because you have to be asleep to believe it.
There's a 68.71% chance you're right.
Cute.
End of line.
There's nothing in this world that you can own that I can't take with force, except Bitcoin.
Take your stinking paws off me, you damn dirty ape!
Euros are going to zero. The yen's going to zero. The Chinese currency is going to zero. It's all going to zero against Bitcoin.
Look at these 3 words written larger than the rest, with a special pride never written before or since. Tall words proudly saying, "We the people."
Then what will happen to us? There's no trace of my money. My office is gone. What will I do? How will I live?
Your programming tapes have been altered.
You are in error. You are a biological unit. You are imperfect. I am Nomad.
Lovely, ladies and gentlemen, lovely. Hope you're all doing well. Hope you stacked some sats, some Bitcoin under 20,000, because man, it moves quick, don't it? Man alive. My goodness. Incredible. It's Nomad 21. Welcome to our little program. Tell your mom, tell your friends, stream it on Fountain or Spotify or Google or Apple or Antenna. Wherever you find your favorite podcasts. Had the opportunity to speak with the amazingly pro-Bitcoin believer, a veritable Mr. Positivity we all know and love from Bitcoin Toxic Happy Hour, CraigShipp. He is often there. He's there daily, 2 p.m. Eastern Time, with Publord and Anders, who host the program. It's on Twitter Spaces, and it's really cool. And they hash it out bit by bit. I'll leave you a couple of seconds to let that sink in. They hash it out bit by bit on all things Bitcoin. Consummate educators, toxic, happy, knowledgeable. Special guests often include the likes of Lawrence Lepard, Max Keiser, Jeff Booth, and so on and so on. All the who's of the Bitcoin world. So highly recommended. CraigShipp, one of the panelists there, and I can't stress enough that you should listen to that every day if you can. 2 p.m. Bitcoin Toxic Happy Hour. I had a terrific time speaking with Craig, and I'm happy to bring his thoughts, wisdom, and opinions on Bitcoin to you here on N21. It's CraigShipp, folks, Bitcoin pundit, whom a lot of you will be familiar with from the ever popular, the always growing, the always exciting Twitter space known as Bitcoin Toxic Happy Hour with Publord and Anders. Craig, I met you there, and we have exchanged ideas from time to time. I know you're there every day. I have a dirty fiat job, so I can't always be there. But I know you take Bitcoin education seriously, which is a recurring theme on Toxic Happy Hour. And you even have your website, CraigShipp.com/Bitcoin, to educate people and further the cause. And I also wanted to add this. I think you're probably the best dressed man in the Bitcoin space.
Oh, well, thank you very much. But I'm an old guy. Old guys, dressed a little different than you youngsters.
Well, be careful. I mean, I'm 68, so I'm one of the.
I don't know if I'm going to buy that, but you sound a lot younger. But if you want to say you're 68, we'll go for it.
Yeah, it's just the vodka. It's just
that can be part of your OPSEC.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah. Off to a beginning note. How did you end up getting hooked up with Toxic Happy Hour? And I just find that a fascinating space. Mm-hmm. For many reasons, but just fill me in on how you sort of got hooked up with those
I really don't remember how I stumbled in. I guess I was just checking out a few of the spaces and just noodling around. And I just really don't remember how I stumbled across theirs, but I did. And it happens to work out for me because I walk in the afternoon time, around that time that they're on the air, 2 o'clock Eastern time in the United States of America. I go for long walks. That's one of my primary means of exercise. And so it worked out because I normally listen to podcasts, which I still do, but it worked out that I could pop in there. And I do enjoy it because there is a lot of information out there that is not very accurate and not very positive as far as I can tell. And so I like to try to counter some of that and try to hopefully steer people in the right direction, especially when it comes to Bitcoin and freedom and things that they can do to improve their position as far as those things go.
Wonderful. And we'll probably touch on Toxic Happy Hour as we go through this conversation, but I really find that valuable time well spent. Bitcoin rabbit hole story. Do you have one?
Well, yes. I snowbird down to Florida for 25 years, and I'm planning on making that permanent Florida because Maryland is the state that I was snowbirding back and forth to, spending the summers up here and spending the winters down in Florida. And I played tennis with a gentleman from Canada. And in the very early days of Bitcoin, he used to watch, I guess it was Russia Today, the show that Max Keiser was on.
Right.
And in the very early days of Bitcoin, when Max was talking about it, he kept bugging me to try to mine Bitcoin. And back then you could do it with a regular computer. And so I didn't pay much attention to him. And a couple of years went by and he brought it up again. And that was probably around 2013. And I was thinking, wait, this thing is still around? Because I thought for sure that the government would shut it down. And that's why I really didn't want to get involved in it in the very early days, because I said, there's no way that the government is going to allow something to exist that competes with the US dollar. And they're just going to shut this thing down, smash it like a bug, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so 2 years went by and the thing was still alive. And I said, wait, what's going on here? How come this is still around? Because I thought it was a great concept. I just didn't think that they would allow it to survive. And so that's when I started taking a closer look at it. I didn't end up mining, but I did end up buying some Bitcoin in late 2013. And then I also saw that it was very volatile. So I was trying to time the market and sell it when it would spike up and try to buy it back when it was lower and try to play that, just not with leverage, but just trading in and out on the volatility. And then, thank God, it was late 2013, maybe early 2014, that I stumbled across Adam Meister on his YouTube channel. And he convinced me to not try to play around with the trading anymore and just to stack Bitcoin and just have a strong hand, not sell it, just pile up as much Bitcoin as possible. And back then he recommended that you have 21 Bitcoin. And so, I thank God that I listened to him and I didn't continue to trade because it's very difficult to come out ahead doing that. Just very, very difficult and stressful as well. And so from that point forward, I just started stacking Bitcoin. I didn't start talking publicly about Bitcoin until early 2017, before the big run-up started. I guess Bitcoin was around $1,000. And that's when I started kind of talking publicly about it. And as a matter of fact, I had Adam Meister over to my place and we did an interview. We did a YouTube video and that has well over 100,000 views. And it was my dad, who was at the time 90 years old, interviewing Adam Meister about Bitcoin. And so we did that. And then I had him back again a couple months later and I interviewed him. But the one that blew up was the one with my dad, a 90-year-old investor, talking to Adam about Bitcoin. And my dad actually bought Bitcoin and he has since passed, but he had a strong hand right until the end. He didn't sell his Bitcoin. And so when I hear all these people say that, that boomers don't get it and all of this, I'm not so sure I buy that. There was a 90-year-old that got the concept and that bought into it. And of course, I'm not a spring chicken myself, and I've bought into it significantly. So I think anybody of any age, once they take a look at Bitcoin and understand what it's about, they're going to buy into it.
Cool. I agree with you because I've just recently been looking at some podcast analytics, and my numbers are reflecting that there are a significant it's a significant portion of my audience that is from, I think it was from 55 to 65. And I was surprised by that. And we shouldn't be, because, people like you and I have been following this for, a decent amount of time. I got in at the top of 17.
A lot of people did. Yeah. A lot of people FOMO'd in.
That's right. And, shit coined around for a while too, and then got burned, as we all did with that plummet. But then I noticed that Bitcoin held its value a little bit better than the shit coins, and then it came back to life slowly and steadily.
With Bitcoin, you only get burned if you sell.
That's right.
That's how you get burned with Bitcoin. And I was listening to a popular podcast, and I won't name the name of it. And the gentleman was interviewing somebody, and his guest made a comment about Michael Saylor telling people that they should leverage their house, take out a mortgage on their house and buy Bitcoin. And he was saying how irresponsible that was to give that advice, because that's basically what he did. He leveraged and bought Bitcoin.
Yeah.
And some of it, at 40,000 plus, right? And so on. And this gentleman was saying how irresponsible that advice was. And I was thinking to myself, well, wait, what are you talking about? Are you talking about you only had like a 2-year time horizon? Was that your time horizon?
Right.
Because Michael Saylor has always said, only buy Bitcoin if you're planning on holding it for 10 years.
Yeah.
So we won't know if his advice, if people bought at 40,000 or 50,000 or even 60,000, we won't know if that advice is bad advice until 10 years from then.
Exactly.
So one thing that really burns me up in the Bitcoin community is there are so many people that are short-term thinkers. I mean, and there's so many people that talk about selling their Bitcoin, and they talk about when they would sell their Bitcoin and under what circumstances they would sell their Bitcoin. And to me, if somebody is talking about selling their Bitcoin, they've already lost the battle.
Mm-hmm. It's a labor of love, and I agree with you on this point. Because...
No. Let me just make it clear. The reason I'm saying that is the only way you're going to win with Bitcoin is if you're the last man standing and you have the Bitcoin. Mm-hmm. Because I've seen too many people sell at what they thought was the top, right? And then later there's another
chase
top.
It to get back in. Yeah.
And it's so early. It's so early in this transition to Bitcoin that if somebody is even thinking about selling their Bitcoin, they've already lost, because it means that there's going to be a point where they're going to sell it for fiat and they're going to be screwed.
Yes.
And so these are the kinds of things that I like to try to counter, because a lot of the people in Toxic Happy Hour, for example, came in like you did around 2017 during the big pump. Mm-hmm. And so they haven't been through 2 full cycles. I think you have to go through 2 full cycles with Bitcoin before you really understand that this is a long-term play. This isn't something that you think about the next 5 and 10 years. You think about 20 and 30 years.
Yeah. No, I'm there with you. And the few friends that I've managed to orange pill are always hounding and pestering, like, do you think we should sell it here? Should we sell it there?
Yeah.
It's like, dude, you don't get it. You don't get it. You're never going to sell it. Why would you want it? What do you want to sell it for? What are you going to replace that with?
Yeah. They don't realize that this is a pristine asset.
Nobody's ever going to want to sell back to US dollars.
This is the only asset that can't be taken away from you. Okay. I've been selling things like crazy on eBay. I just sold a pair of Lucchese boots, for $1,000, right? Mm-hmm. That I don't wear that often. I have a couple of pairs. They're American Alligator. They're, really nice boots. I took that $1,000. I'm going to put that in Bitcoin. Now, what's that going to be worth in 10 years?
Mm-hmm.
How many pairs of high-end boots will I be able to buy in 10 years if I choose to? Because I took that money out of something that is not really gaining value. They were holding their value because they're San Antonio made boots that are kind of rare and so on. Yeah, but collectors collect them. But and I've been selling other things, right, that I don't really need, that I don't use that often. I just sold a high-end leather jacket on eBay as well. I just shared it on my Facebook. I'm on my Twitter, because I'm just taking that money and I'm converting it into a very hard asset. Okay, that is no freaking joke. All right. This is why I'm doing all of this. This is why I'm taking any extra income I have from my business and putting that into Bitcoin. And it's a one-way valve. It goes into Bitcoin. It doesn't come out.
Mm-hmm.
And it goes into cold storage. Okay. And so when I hear people talk about, oh, it's delayed gratification, not never gratification. In other words, in 10 years, I'm going to buy a Lambo or whatever. I don't know what they're thinking about.
Yeah.
I really don't. I don't think they understand the significance of this transformation that we're going to go through, if they're even considering selling their Bitcoin.
Yeah. It's really, of course, when I got in the frenzy of 17, it was all that, and the bells and the whistles and speculation. My life changed because as a citizen of Canada, I watched a dramatic change in the society coming down from the government and through mass media.
Yep.
And it was crazy. It was like a bad science fiction movie. And I just loaded everything up. And I actually did the same thing you did, except it was guitars and amplifiers and music gear, and sold it, put it into Bitcoin. The change for me, as I learned more and more, going deeper down the rabbit hole, was so profound that as I crossed the border of the U.S. from Canada in a helicopter, because at the time you could not drive across the border because of the COVID nonsense.
Yep.
I had 12 seed words in my head, and all of my money was secure.
Super
what
cool.
A profound change. And what, the practicality was, clearly it worked, it was clockwork. It was exactly what Bitcoin was for. And, it's changed my life in so many ways. The positivity, the incentive structure, and it's really a joy to watch the incentives fall into place. And I wanted to ask you about this because the mining world is making big headlines within the Bitcoin universe these days in terms of it monetizing energy. Can you speak to us with your thoughts on that incentive structure and how profound it is? Because I think even a lot of Bitcoiners don't see what's coming. It's going to be huge, don't you think?
Well, there are a lot of benefits to electrical grids. I mean, anybody that can mine Bitcoin efficiently is going to come out ahead, right? It's just simply a competitive thing where the folks that operate the most efficiently are going to earn more Bitcoin, which is the hardest form of money we've ever had, right?
Mm-hmm.
So obviously, if you run, a hydroelectric dam, and you've got surplus energy from time to time because the grid has varying loads, right, that need to be put on the grid depending on whether or not everybody's running their air conditioning or whatever they're doing. And so if you've got surplus energy from time to time, if you can take that energy and convert it into Bitcoin, you're going to have a competitive advantage. And anybody that's in the energy business is going to figure this out. And they're going to want a competitive advantage because if they don't take that competitive advantage, somebody else is going to.
Yeah, you'd be a fool not to. And specifically stranded energy.
Sure. Any form of energy out there that somebody can take, and again, it's got to be efficient, right? They have to operate efficiently. Mm-hmm. They can efficiently convert that energy into Bitcoin. They're going to come out ahead. It's simple as that, because again, we're going back to, this is the most pristine asset that we've ever had. People like to have assets that are pristine. Maybe like Michael Saylor's place down in Miami, his waterfront estate, right? That's a pristine piece of real estate, right? Mm-hmm. That is extremely rare and is therefore valuable and desirable, right? Mm-hmm. This is what people want. They want paintings by the masters, right? They want a super rare Ferrari, one of 50 made or whatever, because these things are deemed to be pristine assets. The asset's that is going to be the most pristine asset going forward is going to be Bitcoin. And more people are going to wake up to that. And so they're going to want to get it any which way they can. I mean, sure, the energy companies and people, that can put a water wheel in, they're in Africa or whatever, and they've got a stream that always flows, and they can put a water wheel in and run a couple of miners. Anybody's going to figure out ways to do this. And what's neat about that is it decentralizes the mining operations as more and more people figure this out, and they're all spread all around the world. That's the beauty of this whole Bitcoin thing, is it's worldwide. It has an addressable market of 6 billion people with phones, however many have phones, right? That's the addressable market of this thing.
Exactly. Yeah.
And so these people are going to wake up. I don't think the anti-Bitcoin folks, I don't think they can count on the fact that people are not going to wake up to this, because I think people are going to. That's my bet. That's my belief. There are two reasons why I've pretty much invested everything in Bitcoin. I still have my house paid for, and I'm going to sell my house up here in Maryland and put that money in Bitcoin. My house down in Florida is paid for, and that will not change. But everything else is going into Bitcoin. I'm selling things left and right. Right? I mean, I'm doing whatever I can to put as much in Bitcoin.
You're the guy on the empty lot with like a sweater on.
And the reason, and the reason,
smile on your face.
Yeah, and the reason that I'm doing it is I've come to two conclusions, and these are the most important things I'll probably say in this podcast. Number one conclusion is the government is not going to be able to successfully shut down Bitcoin. Okay, period, full stop. That's done. They can't do it. Okay. Mm-hmm. The second thing is they and others cannot keep people from realizing what this is. They can't put the genie back in the bottle as far as the education and the knowledge spreading. So those two things together mean that an asset with a fixed supply of 21 million units that have to be able to go around to 6 billion people, right? Mm-hmm. That tells you something, right? When you look at the fact that there's going to be 6 billion people trying to get as much Bitcoin as they possibly can, all right, what do you want to do at that point? You want to front run them.
That's
you want to get as much of that as you can, because your time and your energy is always stored in something. You're either going to store it in fiat currency, which some people do. You're going to store it in your house. You're going to store it in some collectibles, like I mentioned. You're going to store your life energy and your time, which is basically, that's what money is. All it is it's storing your efforts and your work so that you can use that later on, right? It's a storage device. Mm-hmm. And so as people realize that Bitcoin is the best storage device of your energy, that's where they're going to put their life's work, is into Bitcoin. And this thing at this point is not stoppable. And this is what I study all the time is it growing? Is there still adoption?
You just got to keep your eye on that hash rate. It's incredible.
Can that be stopped? Right. So you look at the number of wallets, you look at all the different data that you can get. And if it is continuing to grow, then we're good. because the supply can't grow. The supply is fixed.
That's right. Yeah. It's
Okay.
stuck.
So if the demand increases, therefore the network is growing, therefore the demand is increasing. Well, what's going to happen? Duh, right? It's going to get more valuable. The purchasing power of the Bitcoin is going to increase. And so people eventually are going to understand this. And for people that are betting that that will not happen, I think they're going to lose that bet. The Jamie Dimons of this world that think they can spread FUD and get people to not take this thing seriously. Those people, I think, are going to lose.
Yeah, and I think he's just full of shit. I think he's saying that by design. And, watch what I do, not what I say. It's one of those classic
Well, it's
cases.
a huge threat to those people, right?
Yes.
It's a huge threat, and people know this, and this is not going to be hard for people to put two and two together. And then the other thing that I will say about Bitcoin that is kind of unique is you have some really smart people like Michael Saylor, who he will actually allow you to copy off his paper. Right?
Yeah.
It's like you're in a high level college
with
course,
a rocket scientist,
and you're got the smartest guy in the room sitting right next to you, and he's taking his paper and just giving it to you and saying, "Here." Yeah, I mean, so
you're doing the same thing with CraigShipp.com/Bitcoin.
I mean, I'm not going to second guess that guy.
No way.
Right?
No way.
I mean,
and when you have the smartest people in the world on your project, on your team, it's unbelievable. It's such a good feeling. And we haven't even mentioned the builders. We're building, the whole bear market, what's going on. Everybody thinks.
Oh, by the way, I want to get you to stop using that bear market term, because that's another thing that bugs the heck out of me.
Well, yeah, because it's been a 14-year bull market.
If you've been in Bitcoin long enough, there is no bear market.
That's right.
Okay. Only short-term
I'll take my lumps.
Only short-term thinkers are worried about the short-term price of Bitcoin.
Right.
Okay. And for me, 2 years, 3 years, that's short-term.
Sure.
So if you're looking at Bitcoin is way down right now in price, you're comparing it to a price like less than 2 years ago.
Yeah.
All right. That's ridiculous. And so, when I hear some of these guys say, well, we're in a bear market, I got to be careful what I do.
Yeah.
So does that mean when we have a spike in price, you're going to spend your precious Bitcoin?
Not me, sir.
What are you saying there?
Your point is well taken, of course. But my point was the building that's going on when people think that, the media thinks Bitcoin is
when
dead.
There's not as much hype. When there's not as much hype.
Not as much sound and fury. And it's really amazing what they're building. These are real use case based projects and life-changing. And I've always believed this, about halfway down the rabbit hole, I began to understand that Bitcoin is the single most important social tool human beings have to protect their freedom and their rights. And
yes.
The builders are reaffirming that and perpetuating that idea with the projects that they're putting out.
And yes, and it's all growing. See, that's the thing. And when you have, in the 70s, we had that book, Population Bomb or whatever, where they said that there's going to be too many people and everybody's going to starve and all of this. And what those people don't understand is that the more brain power you put behind a problem, that you put towards solving a problem, right? The cumulative brain power that you put against that problem, the more brains you have working on it, the better. And that's why as the population of this globe increases, we get better at everything because it's a cumulative thing. You don't know what dude is going to figure out how to do fusion, right? And solve the world's energy problem, right? You don't know who's going to break that puzzle, right?
Right.
And so you get all these brilliant people working on these problems, and these problems are going to be solved. And that's what we're seeing with Bitcoin is every year there's more people working on this protocol. It's basically internet money is basically what it is. It's digital money, and it's a protocol, and everybody can participate in it, and people can build apps, and people can, connect to it, and so on and so forth. And all these brilliant people are figuring these things out. And what's interesting is if you own Bitcoin, you're benefiting from all of that work, even if you do nothing. If you do nothing at all.
Yeah.
You just buy the Bitcoin and put it in cold storage, for God's sake.
Sit on it like a hen.
And then now I am doing things because I have the time to do it. I'm, retirement age. I have the time to put some time into Bitcoin and trying to help spread the word and educate some people, because I've gotten to the point where I feel like this thing is for real. It can't be stopped. It's just going to keep growing and so on. So I feel comfortable talking to people about it and recommending that people get involved in it and so forth. And I don't even, very rarely will you ever hear me say, well, and this is not financial advice. Actually, it is financial advice.
Trust me.
You want to save your freaking ass, you better take these assets that are being debased, and you better put that in something that's solid like Bitcoin.
Yeah, I agree.
And so, I just really think that that's the key to this whole thing, is it continuing to grow and people continuing to learn the truth about Bitcoin and about the competing currencies that, that they should probably get the heck out of.
Beautiful. Well said. Bitcoin seems to me, and to a lot of us, to expose truth. It's like a mirror you can hold up to a situation or a given narrative, and it exposes what's in front of it for what it is. So with fiat money, we see this happening with quantitative easing and so on. Yep. As we chase the concept down the proverbial rabbit hole, our eyes are open to so much more about, the lies we've been told and the things we've been force fed for years and years and years as a society. And particularly this has crystallized in the last 2.5, 3 years.
Yep.
How does it, with this quality in mind, how does it help us win? How do we step out from under this colossal foot that is constantly trying to stamp us out?
Yes.
How does the truth of Bitcoin, as the single greatest social tool available to humanity, how does it help us?
Okay, so if you go back to when the federal income tax was started in these United States of America, believe it or not, they didn't even have withholding taxes then. People had to voluntarily pay their taxes, right? Now, the tax man could come after you. He could figure out that you really weren't, and but that didn't happen that much, really. Really, it was more voluntary. And a lot of people during the war, World War II, they voluntarily paid their taxes because they thought, hey, we need to support the guys. We need to build tanks and all that. Of course, I don't believe in any of that. I don't believe in war. But, they voluntarily paid. And so now, fast forward many, many years, we've gotten to the point where nothing's voluntary, where they can just take whatever they want, whenever they want.
And government, CBDCs on the horizon.
Yeah. And government has grown out of control. The federal government is out of control. Its spending is totally out of control. And so the way I see it is the only way we're going to solve this problem is with competitive environments emerging. Places like El Salvador, he in Bitcoin City down there, he's going to have no property tax, no income tax, no capital gains taxes. It's just going to be a flat sales tax on anything that you buy, and that's going to be relatively low. And so you're going to have communities like that are going to spring up all around the world, and it's going to be very competitive, one community to the next. Communities are going to try to get you to move there with your Bitcoin and live there. They're going to try to make it attractive to you and so forth. And so what's going to happen is these high tax areas are going to they're not going to be able to compete. And of course, with Bitcoin, they won't be able to take the money. You'll have to give it to them voluntarily. Okay. Which turns the whole thing on its head. It turns everything around.
Right.
Right now, they can just take whatever they want, whenever they want. They just make an excuse and they just take it. Or they just spend a whole bunch of money, it's printed out of thin air and spend a whole bunch of money and there's no accountability. Anything. They can't do that with Bitcoin. Okay. So Bitcoin is going to change the entire dynamic to where I think governments will be more localized. They'll be much smaller. Each community will determine, what services the people want and what services they don't want, and the people will voluntarily pay for that.
Yeah.
And it will, and also personal responsibility will rear its ugly head, and everybody will have to become more personally responsible. Imagine that, right? To where people take care of themselves and they take care of their family and so on and so forth, and they don't rely on a big government to do all of that because the big government isn't going to be there. And so I think it's going to take a while for these things to happen, but I think they're going to happen. I think the key is going to be people voting with their feet. Like what I'm doing, where I'm selling my house in Maryland. It's become way too socialist. I'm selling my house. I'm moving down to Florida. Florida is a lot freer than Maryland. Now, if Florida becomes less free and then I have to move again, I can do that. I can take my Bitcoin with me. Like you said, I can take it with me in my head. Right.
Yeah.
And so
do you think folks like you and I who value traditional values of self-sovereignty, of freedom of speech, of amendment rights, all these kinds of things. Do you think we stand a good chance to be able to stay in, say, someplace like Florida, should you choose to uproot and bring yourself here? Or
I think so. I think there's going to be competitive forces that are going to kind of force that issue.
Yeah. These parallel markets and communities, maybe, like, for example, the beef initiative that we see so much about on Bitcoin Twitter, right?
Yes. Yeah, all these kinds of things are going to happen. And imagine if you're in a community, they tried to do a test community, I think it was called Celebration Florida, outside of Disney World, and they tried to create like a community around certain values and certain things. Now, not that I don't agree with what they were doing there, but it's the same concept where you create a community and all of those people, they have a certain set of values and so forth, and they form a community and they operate in that community. And let's say there's some farmers there that are just selling direct to the people, right? And the people are paying in Bitcoin, and the cobbler is fixing shoes for people, and the people are paying in Bitcoin. And when he goes and he buys something, he's using Bitcoin, and it's all a circular economy, and it's all based on Bitcoin. And again, you're going to need very little in the way of government action because the people are going to be taking care of their own community. And I think we're going to see more and more of that. Florida is like that. Florida is a lot more efficient than a lot of states as far as their taxes and so forth. They have no state income tax, and even their property taxes are competitive. Their sales tax is competitive. So they're a lot more efficient than a lot of states, and they can still be a lot more efficient than they are, right, under a Bitcoin standard. It can only get better.
It can only get better.
And so I think that, yes, we're going to see all of these things. I think it's going to take time. Now, I am not a doom and gloomer like some people in the Bitcoin space that they think like, the end is near, like in the next couple of years, it's going to be, unbelievable. And they're going to force us all to eat bugs and all of these things. I don't think it's going to be as dramatic as a transformation as some people talk about.
Well, they did put a bug plant 1 hour down the highway from where I grew up in Ontario. It's happening.
There's going to be some wild things, but I don't think the people, especially, for example, the people in Florida, I don't think they're going to put up with a lot of the things that the doom and gloomers are talking about.
Yeah,
I think that things like the climate change scam, I think people are starting to come around and realize that some of these things are total scams, and CO2 is actually good for plants and good for crops,
Absolutely,
right?
yeah.
Higher levels of CO2 is a good thing. And if the globe actually does get warmer, which I think it is, I think we're in a natural cycle of getting warmer that's happening over like 1,000 years. It has nothing to do with cars and factories and any of that. It's just a natural thing that's happening. But that's good. So yeah, CO2 is basically a good thing. It allows more crops to be grown all around the world. Places like Siberia were growing crops, back in the Middle Ages that they could never grow now. And so if it does actually warm, like they've been talking about, and I think it is warming, and it's going to be probably over 100 years' time that we're going to be a degree or 2 Celsius warmer. That's a good thing. By any metric, that's a good thing. It's better for people. More people die of freezing to death than die of being too warm. Mm-hmm. And also something that's not discussed during the climate scam thing is with global warming, what happens is the areas that are colder tend to warm more than like around the equator where it's hotter. So it's actually a good thing where it's really hot now already. That kind of stays the way it is. And then the areas that are cold just get a little warmer, which
Right.
How is this not a good thing? So really the solution to all of this is Bitcoin, because Bitcoin defunds all of this nonsense. There will not be any incentive for people to spread all of this FUD and do all this ridiculous legislation and programs and all these things that they do, because they won't be able to get the money for it. Right. I'm not going to give them any of my Bitcoin for any of these things. Yeah. And I think a lot of Bitcoiners are not going to give them their Bitcoin. And that's the key thing is we have to give it to them. They can't take it. So again, we've turned this whole thing on its head to where government, if you want to use that term, are just service providers for us. And we pay them based on the services that they're providing that we want.
And this is the way it was originally intended. The idea of a democratic government was to serve the people. We've lost that.
Yeah, when people...
So these incentives, again, Bitcoin incentives bring us back to responsible governance.
When people first started farming, thousands of years ago, that was the first time that we had like surplus things where you might have some corn that you could save and use later on to feed the cattle or whatever, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so you needed security because people could come around and take that because you had a surplus, right? When you were living hand to mouth, just going and picking berries and eating them, you didn't have to worry about somebody taking your berries because you already ate them. Right.
Yeah, right.
Whereas
it's kind of like how I live in my van as I trek across the world, Craig.
Well, that way you don't have to worry about security in your van if you don't have anything valuable in there, right?
That's right.
But as soon as people started having valuable things like crops that they stored for later on or whatever, they had to form together in communities and they hired somebody to help with security.
Right.
Right.
Yeah, here we go. Yeah.
And so this is how these kinds of services came about. And it's just gotten out of control to where it's just ridiculous. Okay. I mean, we could go through so many examples of government and how they waste money and waste resources.
Many examples.
And so what I like to say, and I've said this numerous times in the Toxic Happy Hour, is all of these people, these insurance agents, lawyers, politicians, all of these people are basically bloodsuckers. They're leeches on the system. They don't provide any value whatsoever, right? An insurance company doesn't provide any value because all they do is they act as a middleman and they make money off of the money that ultimately goes to, let's say it's health insurance, for example. They just skim some money out of the system to pay all of their overhead and so on and so forth. They don't make healthcare any cheaper. They make it more expensive.
Exactly.
Right. So all of these leeches that are leeching on the system, the lawyers and so on and so forth, they're all taking pieces of deals and so on and so forth and suing people and moving money around. And all the time they're taking money out of the system. All of these people are going to have to get a real job. They're going to have to actually be productive. They're going to have to learn a skill. Okay. Mm-hmm. That's where we're headed with this whole thing, is the people that are not productive, they ain't going to get any Bitcoin, because Bitcoiners are only going to give up their Bitcoin if they get something they really want.
Value for value.
Yes. And it's going to have to be significant value because right. You're giving up your precious Bitcoin. It can't be some joke.
And you don't even have your designer boots left over for them to shine. So they're going to really have to work hard to find something good.
That's right. They're going to have to work their butt off to get my Bitcoin. I can tell you that right now. Yeah. So that's where we're headed. And I think it's going to be a good thing. And we were kind of like that when we were back on the gold standard and so on and so forth. You know, things were a little bit more real, and people, you know, if you look at some of the houses that were built in the 20s, 1910s, 1920s, around that time frame, you look at the foundations that they put in those houses. You look at the quality of construction. They weren't just a brick facade; they were a block behind that brick, or two or three rows of brick.
You had a homestead, like a small fortress.
They were actually made of masonry, right? They were well made. Now, after World War II,
Bitcoin brings this back, don't you think?
Yes,
I mean, this seems to be what you're saying all along.
It's going to bring back long-term thinking, well-made products and services that last a long time. You know, a high-quality pair of shoes that you can get resold 3 or 4 times, right? Mm-hmm. All these things are going to come back because people aren't going to want to buy the junk, because they're not going to want to give up their precious Bitcoin for that Chinese-made junk.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right. So I think it's a good thing, and I think this is where we're headed. I think the clothing that people buy will be higher quality and will be designed to last a long time. I think they'll have less of it. I think they'll have less of a lot of things.
Do we get rid of the Internet of Things, like the spyware that people are freaks me out, willingly installing into their homes, dryers that spy on you and dishwashers that spy on you and Alexa to talk to you.
Yeah, I mean,
and your car, like a Tesla, has a cloud computer system. It's crazy to me.
Yeah, well, again, I think that's all. A lot of that is just a low interest loan. You know, I can get a 2% loan and I can buy this car with all these bells and whistles, you know, money for nothing. Right. And I'll just, $600 a month. Yeah, I'll pay that for 15 years or whatever. I mean, people are just not thinking, and people are making stupid decisions. And I think that those people are not going to do well on a Bitcoin standard. I think they're going to have to change their way of thinking and their way of operating on a Bitcoin standard, because a lot of the things they're doing now under the fiat standard is not going to work. All right. So yes, a lot of those things are going to go away. Now, as far as some of these services on the internet, like I use Gmail, and I don't mind that they know all my emails and all of that, because
but you're aware, and you would only send something that
I don't really open. Care. I mean, I don't really care that Amazon knows the stuff that I buy and they know my buying habits and stuff. I mean, big deal. Okay. If they get off on that, then that's fine for them. Right. As long as I get the services that I want for the price that I'm willing to pay, then I'm good with that. It's a deal. It's a two-way street, right? I'm accepting their free email service, and I know there are trade-offs to that. Right.
Is this our modern day equivalent of what used to be the party line for the telephone back in the day? A lot of the younger crowd wouldn't know about this, but there used to be a community phone line, and everybody within their individual homes would pick up and just sort of make sure the line was clear. So
it had a different ring. Yeah. It had a different ring. For Joe Schmo would get a ring. You'd have a different ring and you pick up. Yeah. But I mean, it's just, all I'm saying is people complain about a lack of privacy. But here's the thing. If you're on the internet, you don't have any privacy. Forget about it. That ship has sailed. So now what you need to do is you need to decide, is it worth it? The service that I'm choosing to use, that's how I use Twitter. I'm using that service. Is what I'm getting out of using that service worth whatever privacy I'm giving up, which is a lot. And in my case, I say yes, because I don't care. I live in public anyway. People know my name. They don't know where I live, but they know my name. They know a lot of things about me because I've been living in public for a long time. My business has been internet based. Sure. I deal with a lot of businesses. They know who I am. And so I can't hide it. And once you can't hide it, then everybody might as well know, right? Yeah. I mean, once the information's out, it's out. So it's very hard to be totally stealth on the internet. And I'm not going to try to put all the energy necessary into doing that because, first of all, I can't anyway because it's already out there. I've been on the internet since 1994. Okay, so trust me, everything's out there. So I don't really worry about it. I think people, and this is one point I do want to make before we wrap up. A lot of people worry about a lot of things that are just minutia, and that maybe they can't do anything about it, and maybe worrying about it is not going to help them in any way, shape, or form, but they're worried about it anyway, right? Sure. Like I'm guilty of that. I'm not really worried about the war in Ukraine because I can't stop the idiots from sending money over there and fighting that silly war and potentially pushing us into a nuclear conflict with Russia. I can't stop any of that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to worry with what I can do. And that one thing I can do for sure right now is stack as much Bitcoin as possible. Buy Bitcoin. And have a go bag and have a plan for if I have to, go to El Salvador or whatever, have some plans. Okay. And do what I can. And I don't mind educating people about some of these things, some of my concerns and so forth. But I'm not going to burn a lot of horsepower on it because it isn't going to increase my stack of Bitcoin. My main focus is increasing my stack of Bitcoin as fast as possible because I think the window of opportunity for buying cheap Bitcoin is closing. I think in the next couple of years, we're going to look back at $20,000 Bitcoin and say, why in the hell didn't we buy a bunch of it? Why didn't we buy more? That's what most people are going to say. I'm not going to say that because I'm already buying as much as I possibly can. So I think that should be job one. And a lot of these other things that people are worried about that they have no real control over, that's wasted energy that could be put into increasing that stack of Bitcoin.
There you go, folks. You know where the man stands. And I would really like to thank you, Craig, for spending your valuable time with me today. I'm coming to you from the beach, on the Gulf of Mexico, and
there you go.
Kind of a rainy day today, but nonetheless, it is a beautiful setting to sit here and have a wonderful conversation with somebody that I'm learning more and more about every week. So once again, folks, I'd like to remind you, you can often hear Craig Shipp on Bitcoin Toxic Happy Hour. That's on Twitter Spaces daily. Do you know the time?
2 p.m. Eastern Time, USA Eastern Time.
With your hosts, Pub Lord and Anders. And also don't forget about CraigShipp.com. That's CraigShipp with 2 Ps.com/Bitcoin. It's a handy guide with videos and links and all kinds of useful things for the beginner all the way through to expert. Is that a fair summation?
There's a lot of information on that page, no doubt.
Right on. And is there anything you'd like to leave us with in terms of your links or other things of note?
No. I just think that it's all good. I mean, the more people learn about this, if your podcast, if we only reach one person that chooses to really learn about Bitcoin and embraces Bitcoin, and then they in turn help educate one person at a time is how this whole thing is going to grow. And so, if we just focus on educating people.
Dude, that's how I got in. I remember, listening to Man, back in 2017, who was it? I mean, I saw RT with Max Keiser. That really inspired me to hear somebody who had been a Wall Street veteran and talk about financial macro in terms that the common man could understand. It really fired me up. Antonopoulos was another guy who I'm like, man, this is wild. And so I know that person you speak of today is out there listening right now, just like we were at some point.
Absolutely.
It's life-changing, man.
Yep. Well,
Awesome.
Keep doing what you're doing, and enjoy the golf. I'll be down there. My house in Sarasota is on the Gulf of Mexico. Beautiful. And so I'll be down there as well. And just keep doing what you're doing. And like I say, stack as much Bitcoin as fast as you can. That's the thing.
Amen. Everybody have a great one. Thanks so much, Craig Shipp. You enjoy the rest of your day.
You do. Take care.